study these things, I cannot help but be reminded of a literary term, the term diction, that is often comes into play. The idea of the importance of words, the power of words, and words that are put together, and how they mesh together to create an image, to paint a picture, to have some kind of impact or effect, or deliver a message of powerful import. Well, man did not create that concept. Man didn't originate the idea of the power of words. In fact, it was God who gave us words and gave us an intellect. And so he speaks to us. So it's not then surprising or insignificant that God decides, that God has chosen to speak to us through the written word. And so here, as we go back to what we were talking about, we talk about the family. And remember 2 weeks ago, I think, and we looked at it, last week, that in my reading, I found a section on this particular verse I thought was interesting. James Gillis outlined a program for what he called the healing of modern society. We looked at one of them in great detail, and the other four kind of go together. But remember last week, number one, the salvation of society is in the family, and the reconstruction of family values, parental authority, and filial obedience. And so we discussed that in great detail. So I want to share the other 5 with you and get your thoughts on it, and then look at the other 3 verses. Number 2, the family is the nucleus of society. What is a nucleus? Center part. What?
Origin.
Yeah. So the nucleus of a cell is its what?
Core.
Its core. And everything that cell is resonates from its core, right? Absolutely. So we talk about the nucleus of the child of God, our souls, and it's the various components, the mind, the heart, the will. Well, the family is the nucleus of society. Do you believe that to be a true statement? How is that a true statement?
It's like somebody said one time, and I don't remember who, how the family goes, so does the nation or the country.
You believe that to be a true statement? I do too. Why is that the case, do you think? That's almost one of those, well, duh, but you're right. You're totally right.
I think the respect and the instruction and the morals and all the things you got in the core of a family, once those broke down, so did kind of this way society started, everything became okay, everything kind of, people started accepting things that weren't accepted prior, and it's just kind of how it goes.
I agree. A nation is made up of what? People. Okay. And families are made up of people. So number 3 was, you can have no prosperous state unless the family is healthy. Number 4, you can have no effective church unless the family is sound. And number 5, the family is the organic cell from which all human societies are constructed. And that one kind of ties into all of them. But what about those? What about number 4? You can have no effective church unless the family is sound. Why is that true, if it's true? I believe it's true. What do you think?
Just like in a family and the church, you can't have an effective church if there's conflict and division and lack of agreement on the basic standards and morals that we're going to uphold.
Well, you don't have to have sound family units for that to happen, do you?
It's harder.
Yeah, that was not
Sarcastic.
well, not sarcastic.
It's not impossible,
No.
but it is hard.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
much harder, much more difficult.
in fact, you do have to have those things. You're absolutely right. The stronger the family units, the stronger the church. And you're right. That does not mean that unless there is that unless you have the family unit just exactly the way you outline, that it is, that something's not. No, God has a place provides a opportunity for every person to not only do his or her part, but to overcome anything that would prevent that person from doing his or her part. So God has a solution for every problem, even before they are problems. But that statement, the more sound the family is, the sounder that the church can be, because, again, the church is made up of people. So, absolutely. Thoughts? Okay. Can't remember if I shared this with you, but I thought this was pretty sound. That chapter 6 is a contribution of the practical outcomes of being filled with the Spirit that we understood from chapter 5. That being filled with the Spirit isn't just a thing, okay? It isn't just something that, oh, goody, I'm filled with the Spirit. In fact, the Scripture's description of being filled with the Spirit is anything but that. Fruits of the Spirit, for example, that we read about in Galatians 5. But in this case, if we're filled with the Spirit the way Paul talks about in chapter 5, then that asserts itself. It's seen here in chapter 6 as it comes to the home. You agree with that? Yes. Household codes connect to our being filled with the Spirit. Okay. There is a reciprocal relationship between parents and children. It's a two-way, yes, absolutely. I love this statement. The child looks to the parents as the parents look to God. And that relationship is pretty strong. So, number 1, or verse 1, children obey your parents. What does that mean? What does the word obey mean? Submit to. To hear under an individual as a subordinate. You know, we don't like that word in American society. I don't answer to nobody is the going trend. And sometimes it's a hard lesson to learn. But to understand that there is an authority. There is an authority, and you listen attentively to that authority because you recognize your place. It is, children obey your parents in the Lord. So this is a pattern that is ordained, if you will, by God. It originates with God. It is not something that is man, has its origin in man. And man doesn't control it. Man doesn't dictate the terms of it. So the idea of children obey your parents is not a subservient, beat you into submission, do my bidding because I'm bigger than you. None of that is in this passage.
I think it's more follow the instruction and wisdom of.
Sure. And recognize that it's kind of like follow the wisdom of, and this is not just a suggestion. In other words, the reciprocal part, you are following that individual. And we're going to get, we're about to, I've been saying we're going to get to verse 4, we're going to do that in just a minute. That wisdom has to also be the wisdom that is from God. Okay, so in the Lord, does that mean that if your parents aren't Christians, you don't have to obey them? So what would that mean? in the Lord, according to the Lord's pattern. That, yes. What else could it mean?
Unless what they're telling you is in conflict with what God's doing.
Okay, so, question. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? Okay.
Conflict, contradiction, whatever comes there.
Would it be acceptable? Now, I don't want this to be a loaded question, but in your opinion, would it be acceptable for, unless, we're not talking about someone who is Hudson's age, which is 3?
Almost 4,
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Or even Annie or Opal's age, even though they're getting closer. But I'm talking, let's go teenager. If a teenager, does a teenager have, is it okay for a teenager who is a Christian to disobey parents who are telling him or her that they cannot go to worship? Is it okay for them to disobey and what do you think? So we don't. We're concerned about answering because we're using the word disobey.
It's okay if you don't get caught.
Well,
I'm kidding.
I know.
Well, I mean, we've had kids that came here that Joey's brought over the years that would have to sneak out of the house to come. I mean,
Okay.
that has happened. It's been something that has gone on. So, I mean,
I don't know what happened to the young man. I wish I did. I need to think about that, find out. But I remember very well a young man that came from the Corinth area. He was connected with a group from Corinth, but he was from another place, another state, and he came to camp every year. Started coming to camp when he was 8 or 9. Came every year. And when he was, it was his last year or his next last year, he'd wanted to obey the gospel a couple of times already. And the big discussion was, and I'm not making this up, I didn't read this in a book, this is the real deal. He said, okay, when I obey the gospel and you baptize me into Christ tonight, I don't have more to go, because my father, who is devout Catholic, said, if you get baptized at Maywood, don't come back, because you don't live here anymore. You don't have a home, or you're not my son anymore. What do you tell that kid? I mean, legit. You know, what do you tell a 16, a 17-year-old who wants to obey the gospel so badly, but you have to understand he's facing nothing. So what do you tell him? I'm curious.
I would hope his father would change his mind.
He didn't.
But if not, I would hope
Yeah.
that somebody would be Christian enough to take them home with them and
Ah.
say, you've got a place regardless.
Okay. So do you tell him, no matter what, you obey the gospel?
If his heart's set on it,
Okay.
I'd say yes.
Okay.
That's his decision.
It is his decision. So if he does do that, do you back him up? Is it okay for him to do that, even though the roof under which he is living is telling him not to obey the gospel? What do you think?
I think you give him an open solution.
Yes, it is his choice, and you don't, that's right. And that's pretty much what happened, is
At
that.
that age, he's getting to almost be an adult.
Mhm.
He's gonna have to start making some decisions somewhere.
Would we, as a church, group of Christians, would we be usurping the family pattern by taking that young man in who obeyed the gospel and who was disowned by his physical family?
Well, Jesus, you know, he used the example of who is my family, and it was Christians. It wasn't necessarily the,
Yes.
And he also said, take care of the widows, the orphans, and
Yes.
those who need.
And he also said earlier, when he began talking about the kingdom, he said, I didn't come to bring peace, I bring sword. And what he meant was, he was talking about the Jews. He was talking about those who would reject him. And he said, houses will be divided. Father against son. Mother against daughter. So in other words, some are going to obey and some are not. So this idea of in the Lord may go a little deeper sometimes. And as children get older, okay, look, let's be straight forward here. Have there been many adults? Let's take it off the teenagers' hands, their shoulders. Have there been adults who have never obeyed the gospel because of the influence of their parents and the grandparents, even though they knew the truth? Absolutely.
I think there's a lot that don't do it because they would have to admit that their parents or their parents or their parents were wrong or
That's true.
weren't doing what they were supposed to. I shouldn't say wrong, weren't doing what they were supposed
Right.
to. And they just can't come to terms with that big of a choice.
Okay, what about verse 2? Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Well, I like that phrase, for this is right. It is never wrong for children to obey their parents. This is right. This is God's pattern. This is God's ordinance, if you will. And then verse 2, honor your father and mother, for this is the first commandment with the promise. I like that first commandment with promise. Literally, it means the first commandment with a promise, and I think the promise is the next verse. That it may be well with you, and that you may live long upon the earth. Okay, first of all, honor means what?
To respect.
To respect. To respect to the highest level that respect goes, I guess is the best way to put that. Words like revere and venerate, which are big words that means you have a high esteem because of the value you place. So honoring your father and mother has the idea of you placing a very high value on the, how do I put this? On the position that they hold, first of all, father and mother. And then hopefully, that wisdom you talked about, the fact that they are doing what they're supposed to, only adds to that. That the idea is that father and mother, because they are father and mother, now if they're doing what they're supposed to, they're fulfilling a role too. But we're not talking about that just yet. Should be a natural respect, a taught respect. It's God's pattern that there is a respect, a value placed on parents.
Well, I think when children learn to obey their parents, honor them, respect, that they learn to respect other elders and people in position of authority.
Sure. Absolutely. That goes back to those statements that I shared with you a few moments ago that, or as you said a moment ago, as the home goes, so goes the nation. You're absolutely right. I don't mean to sound bashing, but it is a true statement that, and I laughed at teachers when I said, or I laughed at, teachers who've said this before, but into the 31st year of trying to do that, I have come to see the job, the role, the system, the students, the parents, the first 10 years of my teaching don't even resemble. In fact, there's almost no comparison at all to that today, because it is so different. And whether you may not agree with this, or you may not totally fully appreciate what this means, but I don't now, and let me make sure I make this completely clear. I'll be honest with you. In a way, I'm glad that corporal punishment is not as much a thing anymore, or the idea of jerking a knot in them, as the old saying goes. And the reason why is there's nothing on this end to, in other words, if I raise my voice and yell at this person, then I'm just another adult in a long line of adults who've done that. Just another person who seems to not care in a long line of people who have made it very clear that they don't care by their behavior and even by their words. And because I used to think that it was I talk about my grandfather, that it was because I knew he'd get me but at the same time, now I don't think so. It was as much as I respected, I did